Welcome, everybody. Whoever body's out there. I'm so excited to keep doing this. I love this part of my week. Today, I am extra excited. I have a very, very special friend, colleague, buddy, LinkedIn buddy. I don't even know how we got to know each other, but we have Paula Pe. Thank you for joining me this morning.
It is lovely to be here. And I'm going to say, this was one of the power of LinkedIn. We did meet through LinkedIn and have formed kind of a business friendship through this. So yeah, so thank you for having me.
I think we need a new word, like a businessationship. We're going to come up with something now because there's a whole new thing, like post-COVID, right? There's all these like friends, and then it kind of like, hey, this is actually kind of real. So yeah, it's like a virtual dating in the new professional world. Okay, for those who don't know you, because silly people need to get to know you right now. So tell us what you do, and then we can get to our important topics.
So maybe we can so just quickly, I was a lawyer for many, many years. Probably 20 years. Most of my career was spent in-house. Last role was as a GC of a hyper-growth tech company. I had the pleasure of being the first GC there, scaled the team to 15, went global, did all the things, the acquisitions, the financings. And then after that, I decided that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and I crossed into the light. And I started a consulting company, and I've done quite a bit of consulting and coaching, all the way to today, where I'm now the founder of GC Collective, which is a wonderful community for general counsel, head of legal, chief legal officer, all around the world. So it's been an awesome journey.
I love it. I love that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that kind of whole like the entrepreneurship, and we'll get to that in a sec. But I always say, like, the only requirement of this is that it's live, and we're going to just not prep. But I did have a couple of questions that were top of mind that you and I chatted, a little bit about. So let me do the responsible thing. Let's ask a couple of questions for those who want to know, what is it like to be really a first-time GC? Let me be honest. There's part of me that's always like, God, I want to do that one day. Do I not? Am I too old and cranky at this point to give that a shot? So I want to hear, what was it like to be that first time GC and being part of such an exciting journey?
Yeah, and I would say maybe it would have been different if I was a first time GC part of a larger team, but I was a first time GC solo GC. And so as much as it sounds glamorous and fun, it was actually really horrible the first year. And so the first year was hard. When you talk about feeling lonely, also I was part of a tech company that was growing. Not as the first lawyer, you have to educate them on what lawyers do, how they can be strategic, but also the business believes that with one person, they're solving all their legal problems. So in my first year, I was expected to close all sales deals on time. I was leading a $200 million financing at the same time and starting an acquisition with a company that offices in Romania, the UK, and the US. I'm based in Canada. So the team just thought I could just do it all. So the first year was incredibly difficult. And as a lawyer also, and I see this so often, is people, they're afraid to ask for resources. So again, there's the guilt of like, they're paying me so much, I need to be able to show my value. But I quickly had to scale the team because it just wasn't working. So the first year was probably the hardest of my career. I would say I've worked hard, but this was a different level of hard until I finally scaled the team. And we quickly went from a team of 1 to a team of 3. And then it was amazing because then I was part of that growth story, and I could start really working with the business on what's my favorite tagline is supporting the velocity of the business. So from there, the journey was really, really, really fun.
So the first year was tough, but I do want to kind of just double click a bit on like that asking for resources thing. So on the one hand, of course, in the world of commercial contracting, and we'll get to that, I'm always like, stop asking for more lawyers, but that's usually already because there's a team of lawyers and you just feel like, you need more and more to do more contracts. You're talking about going from like 0 to, doing some core legal functions. How did you convince the C-suite that you can't do it all? One lawyer just isn't enough for a hyper-growth company.
That's such a good question, and a story I tell all the time. Actually, I was lucky. The person that brought me to Hootsuite, where I was a mentor of mine. He was a CFO there, and he basically, within the first 6 months of me being there, sat me down with his laptop, and he said, you're going to look at the sales projection with me, and you're going to see how much revenue we're doing today, where we're going in 12 months, how many clients we plan on signing, and you need to make sure that you're staffing your team properly. And so this was actually a bit of a surprise to me, because again, we think, oh, I'm just going to work the long hours and I'm going to be fine. But he said, I want you to go back and I need you to build me a model to understand how many contracts can one lawyer support, how many lawyers do you need to support the growth, when do we need to hire them. So he really pushed me in that thinking, and that's something that I brought to so many legal departments after that, because it is important to think about,
Wow.
you know, if marketing and sales and everybody else is going to scale, but we're not thinking about scaling legal with it, we're never going to be able to close the sales deals that are coming, right? There's other things we need to think about. There's technology and all these things, but first you need bodies if you're going to go through hypergrowth. So I was just lucky to have him really support me in that headcount business case, basically.
Yeah, and he was a CFO. You said
He was
he
the
was a
CFO.
CFO. Yeah,
Yes.
that is amazing and unique, because I think you mentioned also that there are a lot of leaders who don't know the value of the legal team, or they don't know what the legal team should do, or they think, well, okay, we have a lawyer, like it's just we've got a lawyer, let's give her all the things to worry about. So that is cool, but it sounds like what you learned from that isn't just, hey, you know, I was lucky and I had a good mentor and I got more resources, but that approach of that business first approach. Yes. I love that. And I feel like there's so many in-house lawyers at all levels. They forget they're there to support a business. They're still like lawyering for lawyering, like at a law firm when the business is the lawyering. You know, does that make sense? Right? Like,
no, 100%. And
you're in-house
it's a learning
to support a business.
Exactly. And it's a learning curve.
Well, so
right?
I love
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, you go from like thinking that your role is just turning contract for risk purposes, right? To do the right redlining and everything, from like, actually your role is critical in meeting our quarterly targets. So your role is, you know, about flagging the risk and helping, but really 90% of what you're doing is helping sales close deals.
The business deal. Absolutely 100%. We need to say it louder and again for those in the back. So, okay, of course, you already touched on contracting, my favorite topic, but we'll get there in a second, because I do want to talk a little bit about GC Collective. As part of your introduction, you're like, I do this and I do that. And you're doing some really amazing things. On the one hand, you set out, you know, to be kind of a coach and a consultant, and a lot of us who feel like, hey, we're good at some things we do, and we'd love to help others if we can, and that kind of takes us on that path of consulting, advisory work. So we'll put a pin in that for a second. But GC Collective, I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because I have this like confusion of, you know, community, the value of community, and there's all these communities that are being, like, I think, developed inside of other tech companies. Respectfully, I think they're for the purpose of sales, and that's fine. I'm not poo-pooing it, but there are others that are really just creating, you know, content and relationship and connection and all of that. But tell me your mission for GC Collective, and kind of what made you think this is necessary.
Yeah. And I agree, there's so much noise in the community world these days. And the more I can talk about why we're different, the better it is. So maybe the origin story might be good to tell, because I think it ties into why we're doing what we do today. So when I left my role at Suite, did a lot of consulting from anything from a small legal department to very large legal department, building strategic plans, doing all of these things. And I just saw a common thread everywhere was those GCs that I work with needed leadership support, and not just, you know, thinking about big topic leadership, but like even some basic management things that we're never learning as lawyers. We don't learn to manage when we're in private practice or in our early years in-house. So anything that goes from how do you manage change? How do you manage transformation? How do you lead a team to actually work together properly as a legal team? Like, what creates a high performing team? How do you find your voice at the executive table? How do you build credibility with the board? So these themes were in every single conversation I was having with every single GC, small team, big team, that was a theme. So I thought, it's great that they work with me, but maybe I can start a community where they support each other and leverage collective wisdom instead of paying Paula to do this. And so I always say my energy comes from helping others. And I think that's why our community is so authentic, is I love doing this. And while I liked coaching, I love doing it at scale. So GC Collective was allowing me to bring what I think are my superpowers to more people. So it started with 20 people in Vancouver that met for roundtables, Vancouver, Canada, every month, and everybody would show up. And I was like, wow, this is actually working. And then we started having dinners, and people were showing up to the dinners. And then we thought, I think we're onto something. So we started the community 2 years ago. It grew really quickly. And going back to the mission, yes, we're there to create that community, that support the community board where people can ask questions and share templates and all of that. But above that, what we do is we help our GCs become better leaders. That's what we want. And so all of our workshops are built around this. So we don't do updates on privacy law, on employment law. Everything we do is focused on making GCs better humans, better leaders. And that's what we do.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because I remember, so when I was in-house, at Microsoft, we very quickly all kind of started to discover that, being a manager and being a leader are two very different things. And every big company, they have HR teams and there's training and coaching, but this concept of managing versus leading is in and of itself two very different things. Managing, administratively doing things as an attorney, we aren't taught that at all. We really aren't. So understanding even what it means to look at a balance sheet and, kind of the projections and staffing and all of that. No, we're not taught that at all. And yet we're given this like department and money to manage. And then there's the leadership part, which is a whole other set of, really, those are soft skills. So it's almost like, I think coming into a GC role, and I have never been in a GC role, but I also spent some time in-house at Snowflake, which is hyper startup-y mode. So we were still kind of growing and forming and storming. And I was in the head of legal ops role and then kind of a chief of staff function to the CLO, and watching this like forming the business of that law department. That's a completely different set of skills than your legal skills. And then there's that kind of leadership thing, right? That you're like, I can't, you know it when you see it. So I think it's an interesting community that you're building, because it seems like the other avenues they're a little bit too big, like the Association of Corporate Counsel. I really, that's kind of one of the few ones I know. I mean, that's enormous, and then it's all layers and it's substantive, and they're trying to change. I think you're kind of freshly new minted category. It feels like you're creating.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what we've been trying to be really niche in who we're talking to. And one of the things that I found when I was a GC, I would go to those meetings with ACC and all the other ones, and there's new ones these days. And there was rarely GCs around the table. So let's say there was a round table and there's 20 of us, there were maybe 2 or 3 GCs and then some junior in-house lawyers. And I ended up always mentoring the conversation. So I felt like when I was going to these places, I didn't have peers that could help me. So that was one of the reasons also that I felt like the GCs need a space where they can talk openly, and they can actually ask questions about challenges that are relevant to their role, not to the junior in-house counsel or even the AGC on their team. Yeah. They need to talk about succession plan. How are others doing this? How are you building a business case for your legal department? These things that are really GC related, technology and improvement, all of these things. And so that's what we try to help with. So yeah, so we've been really niche. We're not trying to build a community of people. We want people that want to grow with us, that have a growth mindset. And it's been really fun. We have such a great group, engaged group. It's been fun.
Yeah. Amazing. So, okay, so now let's talk about one particular area of focus that some might know I tend to have some thoughts on, and it seems that every law department struggles with, and every GC is struggling with, and that is, of course, commercial contracting. And I say commercial, but I mean contracting. Whether money's being exchanged or not, it doesn't matter. Contracting, right? It is the lifeline of business. Every company needs contracts, uses contracts, and every lawyer, it feels like it's the bane of their existence, because we just can't seem to get our arms around it. So I do have a couple of questions kind of targeted for you about this, because you were in the leader role, and now you're hearing from so many other peers, across your community. What I find, I'm going to lead the witness a little bit, is really, taking smart risks in contracting. When it's one contract at a time, I can see a lawyer being able to do it. They take the time, they understand, they, kind of muster up their courage, and they take the risks, and they get that deal done, But when you have dozens and dozens coming at you nonstop, tell me, what was your approach to kind of to smart risk taking? And then how do you counsel others that you work with today in your community?
Yeah, good question. So there's so many good little tips and examples of things I've done when I was at Hootsuite that helped us I always said to my team, my goal is to decrease the number of contracts we review. So if I go back to when I joined, 100% of the customer contracts were coming to legal. That's not scalable, right? So we went first to start about, okay, how can we make the process frictionless? How can we make sure that we review less contracts? So we went straight to order form with online terms. Simple things, but many teams on a scale up are not thinking about this. So first thing we did. Second thing was building that playbook, right? And this is with the tie will be with the risk. And so when we built our playbook, actually sat the team, my big team of 3 back then, and we went through every single clause and we wrote our position, our backup. We did that. It was probably half a day of work altogether. And we suddenly had our playbook. It was a great investment of time. But part of that playbook had risk questions. So the famous limitation of liability and, all of these questions that often will make legal perceived as the blocker on deal. We created escalation paths on those risks. So what we did is we said, okay, so of course, Chief Revenue Officer would like to give unlimited liability, but who's the decision maker on this? Is it the Chief Revenue Officer? And so what we did is we took 2 or 3 of those clauses, we sat down with our CFO, our Chief Revenue Officer, and us, and we said, okay, let's build a decision matrix around this. What kind of delegations you want to give to legal? What kind of delegations you want to give to the Chief Revenue Officer? And when do we need to escalate to the CFO? Because we think the CFO eventually, who's responsible for insurance policies and everything else, also needs to have a say. So we basically made a risk conversation, not legal's problem, but everybody's challenge. And from there, I feel like the tone in the business really, really changed. And that's an example to say to legal teams, I think that's the approach you need to take, is to always partner. And CFO is typically a great partner, right? To align on risk, right? To measure what's the risk appetite of our business. Being in a tech scale up, there was a high appetite for risk. If I'd been working for a bank, the appetite for risk wouldn't have been as much, right? And so having that conversation, I think, is really important and helps legal scale their services in addition to many other things they can do. So
I really can't emphasize this enough. So we always say that, of course, that we call it policy, just for lack of a better word, but like a risk review, a risk, I don't know, contracting review policy, whatever it is, you have to make some official statements, first of all, about what legal does and doesn't want to spend their time on. That is the types of contracts. Once you decide the things you don't want to spend your time on, that playbook suddenly becomes hyper important, because you're also using that playbook as an empowerment guide to the business. And for the things you want to spend your time on, you have now validated with the C-suite that you're going to have the right risk fallback. So even the things that the lawyers are going to be still spending their time on. So there's, first of all, you have to see almost these two paths. But I love what you're saying, and I wish everybody would remember that risk, that decision, it's not just a legal decision. Somehow legal is perceived to be the decider. Legal ends up then kind of taking on that role instead of pushing back and saying, thank you, appreciate the trust you have in me. I can't scale to support the growing business. I need you to actually have a conversation with me and decide together. So we are always hammering on kind of that collaborative approach, because contracting is an enterprise business. It's an enterprise-wide, company-wide, and too often we see legal figuring it out, handling it, deciding, doing legal. Like contracting equals legal. That's a problem, and I think that is a core kind of base assumption that needs to be rattled every time when we deal with law departments that ask us for help, which obviously, Paula, we're going to do a little shindig thing together. We've got an event coming up, a webinar in mid-November, I think. So we're going to be tackling exactly this, and we're going to tackle kind of like, how do you methodically approach it? I mean, you had a nice methodical, you're like, here's what I did. We needed a playbook. When I wrote out the playbook, I needed to confer with these other leaders. They had to chime in on things, and they had to step up and say, yes, I will be the decision maker, which is huge. So what you did organically or naturally, and approached it this way, I think for others, it's not as obvious, and that's okay. Not everybody has to know how to do this. that's why kind of we banded together to specifically help. It's okay. We'll walk you through those steps because, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're so buried with that work. Taking stock is really hard, right? Stopping to take stock.
It is, and it's exhausting. And every time I hear a team that's exhausted by contract, I have this like need to jump in and be like, please let me help. Don't pay me. But here are my 5 things you need to do tomorrow. I have a slide on this, I have a thing on this, I have those templates, and I almost have my draft email ready for those that come to me. And I'm like, just do this. And it's so small, but start there and you're going to feel so much better, because so many legal teams are drowning in contract work, and it's sad.
Right. Because it's just too much, right? And each contract feels like its own little beast to deal with. And you can't just step back and you can't see the forest for the trees, right? There is a forest and it's on fire. You can't go one tree at a time and go, let me put that one out. Exactly. So that's kind of what it starts to feel like. Okay, let's talk a minute about, you mentioned playbooks. Because I'm a nerd on the topic, I've broken down playbooks into like 4 different types and categories, because especially now with AI contract review, look, we went 21 minutes before AI came up. I think we might have just had a record on the coffee and contracts program. But with that explosion of tools and technology, which of course we should address as well, playbooks now have yet another flavor and meaning, and it isn't like the old days where you're doing it in a Word document.
No, exactly.
All the notes, right? Now it's for automation, but playbooks for the business versus playbooks for legal. I like to call the ones for the business empowerment guides. Tell me what you think the role of the business should be in contracting, and how did you kind of force that conversation?
Yeah, this is another, again, I'm big on tactical tips and easy ways to tackle things, but I've always told my team we were trying to do things more better was our tagline, because we thought it was funny to use that. And one of the things that one of our goals was decreasing the amount of work that was coming to us, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you think about how to empower the business, what we did is, again, conversation with the C-suite. I went to the C-suite and I said, here's the current state. And again, we were a small company at this time. Current state is every single contract is coming to legal. That makes no sense. I'm reviewing the hotel contract for marketing for the event, and I'm reviewing like the printer agreement. And so can we agree that we want the business to be taking some risk and that legal doesn't need to be involved? So we had that conversation first with the CEO, after that with the rest of the executive. And we build, I don't like to call them policies sometimes, because policies feel
a big word
to put together. It's like, oh, I have to book half a day and write it. It was a slide. It was one slide that we gave to the business that said what we're not looking at. Yep. There's a dollar amount. There was a bunch of things that were in there, but that's kind of how we empower the business to say, these things, we trust you, the business person, to be looking at the contract. We would give them some tips on the things they need to look for, but we don't want to see it. And we want to empower you to, get better with your legal skills and take some risks. So that was one thing we did that really, really helped. Can
you also just say one more time for the people in the back, please? If you are a legal team of 1 even, or 10, it doesn't matter, and you are currently in that position of, well, we review every contract. If that is going to come out of your mouth, can we just please tell them, don't stop?
No,
that's wrong.
Stop.
Don't do it. Like line in the sand. Like I just feel like there's no time to mince words. That is not a best practice. That is a colossal waste of time and corporate resources. You're an expensive resource. Why would you waste your time on that? Right? Can we just
yes, and I agree. And this is where, like, when I have those calls with those people, I'm like, I need to help, because it's 20 minutes of my time that will save thousands of hours on the other side. But what I encourage, this is a great comment, is ask the business people if they think you should be reviewing every contract, and you'll be surprised. They don't want you. They'll be surprised to hear every single contract comes through you, and they will be the first one to say that's not a good use of your time. But because we don't have the conversation with the business, we just think that's what we have to do. So just have the conversation with the business, because they will tell you they do not want you to be reviewing the $10,000 contract that has basically no risk associated, minimal risk associated with it.
Right. Yes. And I'm going to channel one other commentary that I know somewhere, somehow, if somebody's watching or listening, well, but I really use those contracts to support the business and get to know them and understand the business, and I learn, and I can't say no, I can't say no, but I'm here to serve, I want to be their partner. I want to be their service provider. And I get that like, oh, but and I really want to tell them, you're actually doing a disservice. You are actually could be creating a crutch for them. You're inserting yourself. You're slowing down the business. You are giving them some false sense of security, and you're doing their job. You just stop reading pricing sheets, right? I would have lawyers who are like, well, so I find math mistakes. Don't find math mistakes. Make sure the CFO knows you are no longer checking for math mistakes. Like, am I too tough on this subject, or isn't that how we should all approach this?
We should all approach this. And this is another thing we did, because with the nature, our team did a lot of contracting with customers because we were B2B SaaS. And so that's just a big portion of the legal work. But when I was sometimes kind of looking under the hood, I could see that my team was doing a bunch of legal ops stuff or sales ops things that should have been with sales ops. But again, we draft well. We're really good at writing emails to the client, and we're really good at doing this. So the team just ends up with a bunch of tasks that are not legal, but they're doing it because they want to be the good partner, right? But one of the things we did again is I brought everybody into a room and we did a roles and responsibilities session. And I wrote legal, sales ops, finance, right? And let's just walk through the whole thing. Where does things stand, and get everybody aligned? Because when the security thing comes in, the questionnaire comes into legal, and security bounces it back because they're like, you can answer section 5, 6, 25 to 40. You push it back to security and you say, no, this is your job, right?
That's right.
But that conversation is important because I think that you pointed out, we want to be seen as really servicing the business. And as a result, we say yes to everything. And then we're overwhelmed and we don't service the business well because we don't have time to turn the contract, because we do all of the rest of the things, including sometimes like psychotherapy with our salespeople.
That's right. No, that's 100% correct. And I think for people to understand how those things connect the dots is like, first of all, what is your philosophy on what legal should and shouldn't be doing? What are the playbooks you need to create for legal to be more efficient? What are the empowerment guides you need to create for the business? And by the way, all of that's captured in a roles and responsibilities matrix. So those things all go together, right? Yes. Once you say we're not going to do this anymore, well, somebody is. Well, I better write that down, because these are the things now with legal's column. This isn't sales ops. This isn't biz dev. This isn't procurement, whatever. And it's applicable to any type of contract. And when we say the business, we don't care which part of the business. Whoever needs that thing done, they have a role. And I think that gets forgotten because contracts are legal and they get kind of punted over. So
that's it.
Thank you for, just kind of, I didn't want to lead the witness, but I know you've lived and breathed this. And sometimes it just takes those of us outside of lived and breathed it to say, it's okay. And we survived. Nobody went away in an orange jumpsuit because legal didn't review a $5,000 event contract for a hotel. So that's an important aha moment. Yeah.
I would put all of that under one thing, is a mindset, is what I would say. If there's solo GCs that are listening to us, or small legal department listening to us that are doing this, you have to change the mindset to think about how can you scale your services. Going back to my tagline of more better, going back to a post I did on LinkedIn this week about notice and do. Like, you have to think about how can you do things better to scale the business, right? And so change that mindset. Every time you're doing a contract, you're reviewing a contract, think about, how could I have done this better? What can I do now that will save me time later? And if you change that mindset, you will do small improvements, right, over time. There might not be a full contract review change, but you will start implementing some minor changes that will create some improvement.
I love it. I think with that, we're about to be out of time, and so we're going to end with a couple of closing remarks. So more better. I love that, but I also really, really love this kind of just start making little tweaks. You can't figure out the whole forest, but you have to understand you're dealing with a forest, not just the trees, right? So how do you kind of start? So I love what you're saying. You have to sit with the C-suite. You have to get finance to understand. You have to get the CEO to understand that other people have roles in contracting. That is, like, I think the biggest message. So maybe to just close us out, 30 seconds for those GCs who are feeling alone and scared. Maybe it's their first GC job, or maybe it's their first solo GC job. Just kind of, where can they start to kind of calm the insanity in general, not just contracting, but a couple of words.
Yeah.
please.
A couple words of wisdom, just write things down. I talk always about this. Like, I feel like this is my famous now, next, later list. I give this tip to everyone, but just get everything outside of your brain into a list. And that way, start putting things into buckets of things you need to do today, but also things that are important that you're not spending time on, because all that we're talking about today, you don't have time to do if you're reviewing all the contracts, right? And so how can you think about those projects if you're always kind of spinning your wheels? And so make that list, be very clear on what is important, where you should be spending your time, in addition to always kind of fighting the fires, and set time aside for that. Regardless, contracting and anything that you need to build in the legal team, just make space for the important things.
Love it. Making space, controlling our calendars. Wonderful tips. Thank you so much.
Can I show my last tip?
Please.
I brought this special mug. Oh, it's probably opposite. It's my Dory mug that says "Just keep swimming."
Oh, I love that. I love that. It is coffee and contracts. I'll share with you. I have a chocolate donut. Is that the same? I don't know. But there are some days a year where I am allowed and going to enjoy a chocolate donut.
Well, because it's your birthday, we're going to tell everyone. I forgot to start with that. So we're not going to sing, but
all good things. You only turn 21 once. I might go put a little Bailey's in my coffee. Shh. Thank you so much, Paula. Really appreciate the time. Happy Friday. Have a wonderful weekend, and see everybody next week.